Imagine, just for a second, a beloved community doctor.
Right, like the absolute pillar of a small English town.
Exactly. He is the guy who delivers the babies, he treats the winter coughs, and he's the one comforting grieving families after the sudden passing of their elderly loved ones.
He's universally trusted, revered, honestly.
But hidden within all those comforting words, and buried beneath the ink of the death certificates he signs, is a massive statistical impossibility.
Yeah.
What happens when the person trained to save your life is actually the one quietly ending it?
And maybe even worse, what happens when the very system designed to protect you just, well, it simply looks the other way?
It's terrifying, and that weaponization of trust is exactly what we are unpacking today.
It really is the ultimate betrayal of the social contract we have with medicine, you know? I mean, we are conditioned from birth to trust the white coat. We enter a doctor's office, we offer up our most vulnerable physical selves, and we surrender our autonomy based entirely on this implicit agreement that the person sitting across from us is bound by the Hippocratic Oath.
Right.
When that contract is weaponized, it shakes the very foundation of how a community functions.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today we are adopting the serious, respectful, and analytical framework of Case Unmasked to open the case file on Dr. Harold Shipman.
The scale of this is just hard to comprehend.
It really is.
Yeah.
We are looking at a man who operated primarily in Hyde, Greater Manchester, from the 1970s up until 1998. He is widely recognized as Britain's most prolific healthcare serial killer.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear to you listening, the mission here isn't to just dwell on the macabre or sensationalize the violence.
No, not at all. We're going to trace the chronological timeline of his crimes to critically examine the evidence.
We want to look at the medical records, the missed warning signs, and really dig into the institutional blind spots that allowed an estimated 215 people to be murdered in plain sight.
We have to look at the mechanics of the deception here, because the tragedy of this case is defined by those missed warning signs.
The clues were always there.
They were. Hidden in the paperwork, buried in the pharmacy logs, and completely ignored by the regulatory bodies.
Right.
At first, a single altered medical record might just seem like a clerical error, but we will see how it eventually forms the digital footprint that brings down this decades-long facade.
And we are also going to weigh the modern statistical tools that, had they been deployed, could have stopped this nightmare decades earlier.
The math could have saved them. It's wild.
It really is. But to understand the pathology at play, we need to go back and look at his formative years.
Yeah, where does this start?
So if we roll the timeline back to January 14th, 1946, in Nottingham, we find Harold Frederick Shipman born into a pretty standard working-class family. He was the second of 4 children.
Okay.
The sources highlight this pivotal trauma that occurs when he is 17 years old. His mother, Vera, to whom he was exceptionally close, is diagnosed with terminal lung cancer.
The clinical environment surrounding her final days is profoundly significant here.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, we obviously cannot clinically diagnose him from afar, right? But we really have to analyze the psychological imprint of this period.
Because he's watching her suffer.
Exactly. Shipman was a teenager watching his mother endure agonizing pain, and during her illness, he observed the routine of the attending physician.
Right.
The doctor would arrive at the house, prepare a syringe of morphine, and administer the intravenous injection.
And the relief for her would have been almost instantaneous.
Instantly. You have this young man in a state of sheer helplessness, watching a figure of absolute authority walk into the room and just banish his mother's agony with a single dose of a powerful narcotic.
It is so easy to see how that dynamic, like the profound power a doctor holds over pain and ultimately over death, might shape a developing mind.
The doctor in that scenario represents ultimate control in an otherwise uncontrollable, terrifying situation. It's essentially the origin point of an association for him.
The physician arrives, the narcotic is given, the pain stops, and eventually the patient slips away peacefully.
Right. This early exposure to the mechanics of palliative care laid a psychological blueprint.
He wasn't just learning about the physiological effects of opiates, was he?
No, not at all. He was absorbing the power dynamic of the syringe itself. The ability to dictate the precise moment suffering ends is, frankly, a godlike power.
And he takes that fascination and channels it directly into a medical career.
He was actually quite smart, wasn't he?
He was academically gifted. He graduates from the Leeds School of Medicine in 1970, and his early placements are at Pontefract General Infirmary, where he rotates through surgery and medicine.
Do we know if anything happened there?
Well, some historical reviews of his career suspect that his darker impulses may have begun manifesting there, during his time as a junior doctor.
Interesting.
But the timeline of confirmed, documented systemic failure really crystallizes when we move to 1974.
Because that's when he transitions into general practice.
Exactly. In 1974, Shipman becomes an assistant general practitioner, and shortly after, a GP principal at the Abraham Ormerod Medical Center in Todmorden.
Which is the small mill town on the Lancashire-West Yorkshire border, right?
Yes. So he is now in a position of real community authority.
But that authority fractures almost immediately, doesn't it?
It completely shatters. After roughly a year at this practice, in 1975, his facade collapses. He is caught forging prescriptions.
Oh, wow.
And the crucial detail here is the motive. He isn't running some sort of pill mill or selling narcotics on the street for cash.
Right, he's using them.
Yes, he's feeding a severe personal addiction to pethidine.
And for those listening who might be unfamiliar, pethidine is a synthetic opioid painkiller. It's very similar to morphine, and it's often used in childbirth or for severe trauma.
And the pharmacological grip it had on him was just massive.
How much was he taking?
The sources indicate he was consuming between 600 to 700 milligrams a day.
Wow. That is an astonishing tolerance level.
Yeah.
It indicates a deeply entrenched physical dependency. He later claimed he was using the drug to stave off profound depression, which he blamed on conflicts with his partners over managing the practice.
Always blaming someone else. But the methodology of his theft is where we see his first real manipulation of the medical system.
How did he get the drugs?
He was writing entirely fake prescriptions in the names of his actual patients.
Yeah.
Or he would prescribe a legitimate amount to a patient, fill it himself, and siphon off a portion or even the entirety of the drug for his own veins.
So he's brought before the court in Halifax in early 1976.
Yes. And the legal outcome is definitive. He pleads guilty to 8 charges of illegally obtaining controlled drugs, and the court takes dozens of other similar offenses into consideration.
Okay, so what's the penalty?
He is fined £600, which was a substantial financial hit at the time, and he is mandated to attend the Retreat, a psychiatric rehab clinic in York. He spends the latter part of 1975 there undergoing treatment.
And this is where we arrive at the first massive institutional intersection of the case. You have a physician with a severe documented opioid addiction who has actively forged legal documents, stolen controlled substances from the National Health Service, and exploited the names of the very patients he is sworn to treat.
It's a huge list of red flags.
Exactly. So the obvious question you have to ask is, how does an individual with that specific criminal profile maintain their license to practice medicine?
It requires an unbelievable level of professional blindness. The General Medical Council, or the GMC, is the regulatory body responsible for licensing and disciplining doctors in the UK.
Right, the gatekeepers.
They hold a preliminary hearing to determine his fitness to practice. And there is a vital witness prepared for this hearing, Detective Sergeant George McKeating of the West Yorkshire Drug Squad.
And D.S. McKeating is representing the reality of the criminal investigation here.
Right. He knows what Shipman actually did.
His assessment of Shipman is stark and completely uncompromising. He views Shipman not just as a struggling addict, but as a manipulative individual who poses a severe and ongoing danger to the public.
He sees right through him.
He does. He believes Shipman should be struck off the medical register permanently. He actually attends the GMC hearing, fully prepared to submit his evidence and make his case.
And the panel never calls him to the stand.
Right. Really?
They completely sideline the law enforcement perspective. Instead, the GMC panel relies entirely on the clinical recommendations of 2 psychiatrists who had evaluated Shipman after his brief stint in rehab.
And what do they say?
These psychiatrists assure the panel that Shipman is rehabilitated and no longer poses a risk to his patients.
It is a textbook example of institutional protectionism.
Absolutely.
I mean, the medical establishment is presented with a blazing red flag from a seasoned drug squad detective, and they actively choose to look away.
They look at Shipman and they just see a colleague.
Right. A fellow member of this elite professional class. They view his criminality through the lens of a treatable occupational hazard.
So they issue him a written warning and hand him a pamphlet on the dangers of drug misuse. A pamphlet. The regulatory body entrusted with the safety of the British public hands a convicted opioid forger, a leaflet, and just sends him back into the exam room.
Dame Janet Smith, the High Court judge who later meticulously investigated the breadth of Shipman's crimes during the public inquiry, she zeroed in on this exact moment.
It's so crucial.
She identified a deeply ingrained cultural flaw within the medical profession at that time. It was this powerful instinct to protect the reputation and livelihood of a colleague over the potential risk to the patient.
And that professional loyalty created the exact fertile ground Shipman required.
Exactly. If the GMC had acted on the police recommendation in 1975 and revoked his license, or even imposed stringent continuous monitoring, over 200 lives would have been saved.
It is the defining what-if of the entire tragedy. Because despite the criminal convictions, his career trajectory is barely interrupted.
Unbelievable.
In 1977, he joins the Donnybrook Medical Center in Hyde, Greater Manchester, and his new partners are fully briefed on his past drug convictions.
They knew about the forgery.
They know about the pethidine, they know about the forgery, but they hire him anyway.
Wow.
For the next 15 years, he operates within this group practice, and he meticulously constructs the persona of the tireless, dedicated community doctor.
And he's good at it.
He is so convincing in this role that he even appears on a Granada television documentary in 1983, speaking authoritatively about the importance of community psychiatric care.
The dichotomy is chilling, because behind the veneer of the hardworking GP, the pathology is quietly accelerating.
Right.
The later inquiry uncovered that he murdered at least 71 patients during his tenure at Donnybrook, with grave, unresolved suspicions surrounding another 30 deaths.
But the group dynamic eventually frays, doesn't it?
It does. His volatile temper, his arrogance, and his constant clashes with the staff alienate his partners.
So the professional relationship breaks down entirely, leading to his departure in 1992 to establish his own single-handed practice at 21 Market Street in Hyde.
Moving from a group practice to a solo practice is the operational turning point here.
Why is that so important?
Think about the concept of clinical friction.
Okay.
In a group setting, a doctor is surrounded by checks and balances, even informal ones. You have nurses who might raise an eyebrow at an unusually high dosage of pain medication.
Right. Or partners who might notice if an inordinate number of your patients are suddenly dying.
Exactly. You share files, you cover each other's shifts. There is a constant ambient level of peer review.
So by isolating himself at Market Street, Shipman actively eliminated all of that clinical friction.
He became the sole, unquestioned medical authority for his entire patient list. No one was looking over his shoulder. No one was reviewing his charts.
And the statistical data from the inquiry reflects the danger of this isolation vividly.
Yeah.
Once he was operating completely independently, his kill rate accelerated exponentially.
It's terrifying.
By 1997, he was operating at a horrific frequency, murdering roughly one patient every 10 days.
Let's examine the clinical mechanism of these murders because the methodology is highly specific.
Right. How exactly was he doing this?
According to the confirmed findings of the official inquiry, his victims fit a very distinct profile. They were predominantly elderly, relatively healthy women who lived alone.
Out of the 215 confirmed victims in the first phase of the inquiry, 171 were female.
This victimology is incredibly strategic. He was exploiting a deeply ingrained societal bias.
What do you mean?
In Western society, we possess a psychological blind spot regarding the elderly. When an 80-year-old woman is found deceased in her home, the collective assumption by neighbors, by returning family members, and even by the authorities is that it was a natural, expected physiological event.
Like a sudden heart attack or a stroke in the night.
Precisely. It rarely triggers the instinct for foul play. Shipman understood this implicit bias, and he weaponized it. He knew that as long as the victim looked peaceful, society would accept the death without question.
And the weapon he chose was diamorphine.
Right.
In pharmacological terms, diamorphine is pharmaceutical-grade heroin. It's an incredibly potent opioid. And the execution of the crimes followed a rigid, chillingly mundane pattern.
What was the routine?
He would schedule a routine home visit, usually in the afternoon. He would deliberately select a window of time when he knew the patient would be entirely alone.
So when the son or daughter was at work or the grandchildren were at school?
Exactly. He relied on the absolute deference his patients had for him to gain entry. He was the trusted doctor coming to check their blood pressure or deliver a routine vitamin injection.
And once he's inside?
Once inside, he would administer a lethal intravenous dose of the diamorphine.
Because diamorphine is highly lipid-soluble, it crosses the blood-brain barrier very quickly. It depresses the central nervous system, slowing the heart rate and respirations until the breathing simply stops.
There is no struggle. There is no violence.
No. To anyone finding the body, it looks exactly like the person simply fell asleep and never woke up.
After administering the drug, he would employ one of two specific cover-up strategies. He would either remain in the home, wait for the patient to pass, and then claim to the family that the patient suffered a sudden, catastrophic event right in his presence.
Like a massive coronary.
Right. Or he would administer the injection and simply walk out the front door, leaving the victim to be discovered hours later by an unsuspecting relative.
The brilliance of the cover-up, if you can call it that, was that it was hardwired into the British medical system of the era.
How so?
Because he was the attending physician, the death certification laws, specifically the regulations stemming from 1926, allowed him to be the sole signatory on the medical certificate of cause of death.
You didn't need a coroner.
No, he didn't need a secondary medical examiner. He would simply write down old age or fabricate a pre-existing condition like bronchial pneumonia and just sign his name.
It is a stunning amount of unilateral power.
It really is.
The local registrar would receive this fully completed certificate and just accept it without a shred of independent verification. The system functioned entirely on the honor of the physician.
And unless a doctor actively flagged a death and referred it to the coronial system for investigation, there was zero clinical audit.
So he effectively bypassed the entire legal framework of death investigation by using the credibility of his profession. He declared the murders as natural events.
But the logistics of acquiring the murder weapon reveal another severe regulatory failure.
Yeah, how does a single GP acquire enough pharmaceutical heroin to kill hundreds of people without triggering an audit in the pharmacy supply chain?
Well, the laws at the time did require doctors to maintain a controlled drugs register documenting every ampoule obtained and supplied.
Okay, so how did he evade that?
He evaded this through a grotesque exploitation of terminal care. He would identify patients in his practice who were genuinely dying of cancer and who actually required high doses of pain management.
Oh, wow.
He would deliberately overprescribe diamorphine for them. After the cancer patient inevitably passed away, Shipman would visit the grieving family, adopt the persona of the caring doctor, and offer to dispose of the leftover medication to, save them the trouble.
He was stealing it from the dead.
Exactly. He would take the excess ampoules and hoard them in his own medical bag.
There was an incredibly close call where this exact mechanism was almost exposed.
Right, the nurse.
Yeah. A district nurse visiting the home of a recently deceased cancer patient caught Shipman actively taking the purloined morphine.
She confronted him directly, didn't she?
She did. It was a moment where the entire operation could have been dismantled right there. But Shipman, utilizing that practiced arrogance of his, smoothly explained that he had previously borrowed morphine from another physician to treat this specific patient.
And so he claimed he was just reclaiming the excess to settle his debt with the other doctor.
Exactly. And the nurse accepted the lie. She didn't escalate the incident to the authorities.
It's another instance where the ingrained deference to the physician's authority just overrides basic safety protocols and common sense. The anomaly was rationalized away and the matter was dropped.
And we see that pattern of rationalizing anomalies hit a critical mass in the spring of 1998, specifically March 1998.
This is the moment the first genuine institutional alarm bells begin to ring loudly.
Dr. Linda Reynolds, who was a highly observant GP working at the neighboring Brook practice in Hyde, spots something deeply disturbing in the paperwork crossing her desk.
Dr. Reynolds really acts as the catalyst for the investigation here. She looks past the professional courtesy that had blinded literally everyone else.
What exactly did she see?
She and her partners notice a statistical extreme. Shipman had countersigned 16 cremation Forms B in a span of just 3 months.
Okay, and just to contextualize how absurd that number is, Dr. Reynolds' entire clinic, which was a multi-doctor practice serving 9,500 patients, had only recorded 14 deaths in total during that exact same period.
So Shipman's mortality rate was mathematically impossible for a standard community practice.
She takes these numbers and her growing unease directly to John Pollard, the coroner for Greater Manchester South.
And she doesn't just bring statistics, she brings behavioral red flags, too.
Right. The families of Shipman's deceased patients were sharing strangely consistent narratives in the town.
The victims were not bedridden terminal cases. They were being found fully dressed, sitting upright in their favorite chairs, looking perfectly serene.
With absolutely no history of the terminal illnesses Shipman was listing on the certificates.
Dr. Reynolds was looking at a textbook cluster of unnatural deaths. The coroner recognizes the gravity of the situation and immediately alerts the Greater Manchester Police.
which triggers the first formal criminal police inquiry into Dr. Harold Shipman. This investigation is assigned to Detective Inspector Smith.
And the resulting investigation is nothing short of a catastrophic failure.
It's infuriating. Detective Inspector Smith closes the case in barely 3 weeks.
The investigative missteps are just staggering, especially when dealing with allegations of serial murder.
Yet D.I. Smith was reportedly quite inexperienced in handling complex medical investigations or white-collar crime.
His first failure was completely foundational. He did not run a basic background check on the police national computer.
Wait, he didn't even run his name.
No. If he had simply typed Shipman's name into the terminal, he would have instantly retrieved the 1975 convictions for opioid forgery and prescription fraud.
That single piece of data would have completely altered the threat assessment of the suspect.
Completely.
He also failed to conduct basic fieldwork. He didn't interview the local funeral directors.
And if he had, he would have found that the undertakers were already gossiping among themselves about the sheer volume of bodies being transported from Shipman's practice.
Right, and how strangely similar all the death scenes were.
He didn't interview the grieving families either to see if their accounts matched the clinical notes Shipman provided.
So what did he actually do?
Instead of conducting an independent police investigation, law enforcement outsourced the critical thinking. They relied heavily on a medical reviewer, a Dr. Banks.
Okay.
The police provided Dr. Banks with a selection of Shipman's patient records and asked him to determine if there was evidence of clinical foul play.
And Dr. Banks suffered from the exact same institutional cognitive dissonance we saw with the GMC panel back in 1975.
Exactly. As Dame Janet Smith later noted in the official inquiry, Dr. Banks simply could not open his mind to the conceptual possibility that a fellow general practitioner was operating as a serial killer.
He just couldn't believe it.
Right. He reviewed the files, took Shipman's fabricated clinical notes as absolute truth, and concluded that the treatments and the deaths were perfectly standard.
Based entirely on that superficial medical review, the Greater Manchester Police closed the file. They cleared Dr. Harold Shipman of all suspicion.
And the administrative incompetence here carries a profound human cost.
It really does. Because by closing that file prematurely, the police inadvertently emboldened Shipman.
He realized he had just survived direct scrutiny from the coroner and the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
He felt utterly invincible.
Left completely free to operate, he murders 3 more women in rapid succession over the following months. Winifred Meller on May 11th, Joan Melia on June 12th, and Kathleen Grundy on June 24th, 1998.
The murder of Kathleen Grundy is the pivot point of the entire case.
It really is. And it's a detail born not of a clinical mistake, but of pure, unadulterated greed. It changes how investigators view absolutely everything.
This is the moment where a meticulous, decades-long methodology, refined over hundreds of victims, suddenly collapses under the immense weight of the killer's own arrogance.
Let's focus on that date, June 24th, 1998. Kathleen Grundy was 81 years old, but she totally defied the stereotype of the frail, elderly patient.
She was incredibly active, wasn't she?
Very active. She was the former mayoress of Hyde, a wealthy, healthy, and highly prominent figure in the local community. Shipman visits her home, and shortly after his departure, she is found deceased.
Following his standard operating procedure, Shipman signs the death certificate citing old age and speaks to the family, aggressively discouraging them from requesting an autopsy.
Up to this exact moment, it is his standard, flawless routine. But the deviation occurs when a local solicitor named Brian Burgess contacts Kathleen Grundy's daughter.
And the daughter's name is Angela Woodruff. This is a crucial detail. Angela Woodruff is herself a highly experienced practicing solicitor.
Right. Burgess informs her that a brand new will has surfaced, supposedly executed by her mother, just prior to her death.
And the contents of this new will are astonishing. It entirely disinherits Angela and her children.
Who does it leave the money to?
It leaves the entirety of Kathleen Grundy's estate, which is valued at nearly £386,000, directly to Dr. Harold Shipman.
Oh my God.
It even features a specific clause stating her desire to reward him financially for his dedicated medical care.
When Angela Woodruff, a legal professional who handles documents for a living, looks at this will, she instantly recognizes it as a fabrication.
Of course she does. The signature of her mother is a crude, clumsy forgery.
And the document itself is typewritten on a battered, poorly aligned machine, which is completely contrary to the pristine, professionally drafted legal documents her mother always utilized.
Woodruff does not hesitate or defer to Shipman's authority. She takes the forged document directly to the police.
Which forces us to really analyze his psychology at that specific moment.
Yeah.
After decades of surgical precision of leaving absolutely no trace, why commit such a reckless, demonstrably clumsy crime?
He had to know the daughter was a lawyer.
Exactly. He had to know that a doctor inheriting nearly 400,000 pounds from a sudden death would look incredibly suspicious to the authorities.
It speaks volumes about the distortion of his reality. Remember the timeline. He had just beaten a police investigation a few months prior.
Right.
He had outsmarted the coroner, the detectives, and the medical establishment. This clumsy forgery isn't just greed, it is the manifestation of a profound God complex.
He genuinely believed he had achieved a state of untouchability.
He operated under the delusion that his word as a physician carried so much inherent societal weight that it would automatically override physical evidence, legal scrutiny, or even basic common sense.
But that delusion is shattered immediately. Woodruff's actions ignite a second, significantly more rigorous investigation. This time, it's spearheaded by Detective Superintendent Bernard Postles.
And this team does not repeat the errors of D.I. Smith.
No, they operate with intense suspicion from day one. They immediately secure a warrant for the exhumation of Kathleen Grundy's body.
The forensic pathology provides the undeniable physical evidence. Toxicologists examine her muscle tissue, and what they discover is a lethal, massive concentration of dimorphine.
Crucially, it is non-metabolized diamorphine.
What does that mean exactly?
This means the drug killed her so rapidly that her liver didn't even have time to break the chemical down. The concentration levels prove it was administered within roughly 3 hours of her death.
Which places the lethal injection exactly within the time frame of Shipman's documented home visit.
Armed with a toxicology report, the police execute a raid on Shipman's home and his surgery on Market Street.
And the physical evidence they recover is damning.
They find the actual Brother typewriter with its distinct, misaligned keys that was used to type the forged Grundy will.
They also discover a bizarre, morbid collection of jewelry stolen from various deceased patients over the years.
But the most critical piece of evidence, the evidence that systematically dismantled his entire defense, was unearthed by the forensic computer analysts.
This is where the intersection of timeline and modern technology traps him perfectly.
Tell me about the digital footprint.
So Shipman had been retroactively altering his patients' digital medical records. He was going into the files and inserting fake symptoms, complaints of chest pains, dizzy spells, shortness of breath.
Trying to establish a medical history that justified the causes of death he was writing on the certificate.
Exactly. But he lacked a fundamental understanding of how the medical software operated. He didn't realize the system was recording a hidden metadata timestamp for every single keystroke.
Oh, wow. Think of it like a digital receipt.
Yes. He would type, "Patient complained of severe angina," hoping to create an alibi. But the computer's background architecture recorded that he typed that specific sentence at 4000.
When the patient in question had already been dead since 1:00 p.m.
Right. The system-generated metadata proved definitively that his clinical notes were complete fabrications, written hours after the murders had occurred.
There was a clinical timeline he was inventing and a forensic timeline the hard drive was actually recording.
And that digital footprint completely destroyed any defense of medical error or coincidence. On September 7, 1998, Dr. Harold Shipman was formally arrested.
The subsequent trial takes place at Preston Crown Court, and it is a massive, grueling media event.
The prosecution systematically leads the juror through the post-mortem findings, the physical evidence of the forged will, the fingerprint analysis, and of course that devastating computer metadata.
Shipman, maintaining his arrogance to the very end, attempts to claim that his elderly victims were actually secret heroin addicts.
Wait, to explain the morphine?
Yes, to explain the presence of the morphine in their systems.
That is absurd.
The jury dismisses the lie completely. In January 2000, Shipman is convicted of 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery.
The presiding judge, Mr. Justice Forbes, hands down 15 concurrent life sentences. He describes Shipman's actions as a calculating and cold-blooded perversion of his medical skills.
The sentence was a whole life order, ensuring he would die in prison. But Shipman retained his deep-seated need for control right up to the end.
Right. On January 13, 2004, the day before his 58th birthday, Shipman hanged himself in his cell at Wakefield Prison.
The timing of that suicide is a final act of manipulation.
It was entirely calculated. By ending his life before his 60th birthday, he exploited a loophole to ensure that his wife, Primrose would receive his full National Health Service pension.
Which was a very substantial sum of money.
Even in the act of his own death, he was manipulating the bureaucratic system. And tragically, by taking his own life, he forever denied the families of his hundreds of victims any explanation, any confession, or any real sense of closure.
The sheer scale of the crimes really forces us to ask a broader question here. What drives a healthcare professional, an individual who has sworn the Hippocratic Oath, to become a serial killer?
Are there comparative cases that help us understand the pathology?
It is a rare but heavily documented phenomenon in criminology, categorized as healthcare serial killers or medical murderers.
Comparing Shipman to other notable cases within this category reveals distinct psychological profiles. The sources actually highlight the case of Gene Jones as a comparative baseline.
Right. Gene Jones, born in 1950 in Texas, presents a terrifying parallel. She was a pediatric nurse working in intensive care units.
Her method involved injecting infants and young children with powerful muscle relaxants like succinylcholine.
Which is a drug that rapidly induces respiratory failure and paralysis.
But her core motive was vastly different from Shipman's. Psychological profiles of Jones strongly suggest she suffered from a severe form of Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
Okay, so her primary goal wasn't necessarily the death of the child.
No, her goal was the crisis itself. She wanted the infant to crash so that she could rush into the room, initiate a code blue, and play the role of the heroic savior.
She craved the adrenaline of the resuscitation.
Yes, the center stage attention and the praise of the doctors and her fellow nurses. She was actively manufacturing medical emergencies to validate her own existence and competence.
She was convicted in 1985 for the murder of 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan and was sentenced to 60 years in prison.
The sources do note a controversial legal postscript there. She was actually released in 2020 due to a mandatory release law in Texas designed to reduce prison crowding.
But drawing the comparison between the two helps define the motives. Jones suffered from a hero complex. She required the drama of the emergency room, the chaos of the alarms, the audience of her peers.
Shipman is the complete antithesis of that. Shipman possessed a pure God complex. He actively avoided an audience.
He preferred the quiet, mundane, unobserved setting of a patient's living room.
He had no desire to save them or be viewed as a hero. He wanted the absolute silent power of deciding the exact moment their life would end.
It was about ultimate control, unobserved and unquestioned by anyone.
We see variations of this pathology in other medical killers as well, such as Charles Cullen, the American nurse who killed at least 26 patients by injecting digoxin into their 5E bags.
The inherent access to vulnerable populations and lethal medications provides a unique, target-rich hunting ground for these specific types of predators.
Following the conviction of Harold Shipman, the UK government was forced to reckon with how a single man could subvert the system so completely.
They launched a massive public inquiry led by High Court Judge Dame Janet Smith.
And her official findings quantified the horror. She confirmed at least 215 victims, while acknowledging the true number could realistically be as high as 284.
The Shipman inquiry was tasked with meticulously dismantling the institutional protections that had shielded him.
We discussed the 1926 death certification laws, which essentially operated on a professional honor system.
Dame Janet pointed out that the entire framework was incredibly naive, built entirely on the societal assumption that a doctor would simply never commit murder.
Beyond the flawed paperwork, she highlighted something far more insidious: the deeply entrenched culture of professional silence.
Even when suspicions do exist in a hospital or a clinic, blowing the whistle on a fellow medical professional is incredibly difficult, highly stigmatized, and professionally dangerous.
Institutions instinctively close ranks to protect their reputations and their funding. The sources provide a modern parallel to demonstrate how deeply rooted this culture of silence remains.
Oh, the Liverpool University academics.
Exactly. Patricia Murray and Raphael Levy identified and raised serious safety and ethical concerns regarding experimental stem cell trachea research being conducted by Martin Birchall at University College London.
And their reward for identifying a potential risk to patients was a legal threat.
A spin-off company associated with the research actually threatened them with a lawsuit. It illustrates the point perfectly.
Whether it is a drug squad detective in 1975 attempting to raise alarms about a forged prescription, or academics in 2018 raising alarms about experimental surgery, the initial institutional reflex is frequently to silence the whistleblower rather than investigate the underlying risk.
In the wake of the Shipman inquiry, the UK government attempted to mandate transparency. They implemented massive systemic reforms.
They introduced much tighter controls on the auditing of controlled drugs. They mandated lay members sit on GMC disciplinary panels to break up the medical echo chamber.
And most controversially, they introduced a system requiring all 250,000 licensed doctors in the UK to undergo annual appraisals and a rigorous 5-year revalidation process to maintain their medical licenses.
The stated goal was to systematically identify and weed out the rogue doctors before they could cause harm.
But the efficacy of that system is fiercely debated.
The sources include a blistering, highly critical perspective from a consultant surgeon named Marion Thomas. He pushes back aggressively against the appraisal system.
He argues that it has devolved into a massive, bureaucratic, tick-box exercise that costs the NHS millions of pounds and achieves absolutely nothing in terms of catching actual criminals.
Thomas presents a very compelling, pragmatic argument. He points out a fundamental flaw. The appraisal process relies entirely on the self-reported honesty of the doctor being appraised.
He argues that for the 99.9% of highly moral, hardworking doctors, it is a frustrating waste of clinical time.
And for the criminals, it is a system easily manipulated.
Right. A serial killer, a fraudster, or an incompetent surgeon is simply not going to confess their crimes on an annual self-assessment form.
The government built a system to catch liars that relies on the liars telling the truth.
He provides incredible examples to back up his critique. He points to the case of Dr. Zolia Alemi, a woman who successfully worked as an NHS psychiatrist for 22 years without ever actually qualifying in medicine.
She forged her initial paperwork, successfully passed every single annual appraisal, legally detained vulnerable patients under the Mental Health Act,
And was only finally caught when, in a chilling echo of Shipman, she attempted to forge the will of an elderly patient to steal a £1.3 million estate.
He also references Andrew Wakefield, the doctor who falsified the notorious MMR vaccine research.
And Ian Patterson, the disgraced surgeon currently serving a 20-year sentence for performing completely unnecessary breast surgeries on hundreds of women.
Thomas points out that none of these individuals were caught by the annual appraisal system.
His conclusion is grim but logically sound. You cannot eradicate evil with bureaucracy. Someone with the psychopathic organizational skills of Harold Shipman would have breezed through an annual appraisal without breaking a sweat.
So, if administrative paperwork and pure appraisals can't catch a Shipman, what actually can?
This brings us to what might be the most fascinating revelation in the sources, drawn specifically from the witness statement of statistician Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter to the Thirlwall Inquiry.
This is where the hard science of data intercepts the issue of patient safety.
Professor Spiegelhalter highlights a fundamental flaw in human psychology. Our intuition is remarkably terrible at spotting slow-moving adverse trends.
We are prone to missing subtle patterns, and we overinterpret isolated events.
We cannot rely on human intuition or gut feelings to catch a serial killer hiding within normal mortality data. To see the pattern, we need mathematics. We need a system called statistical process control, or SPC.
Let's break down statistical process control. What does that actually look like when applied to a hospital or a community clinic?
Spiegelhalter outlines two broad categories of statistical monitoring. The first is retrospective audit.
Yeah.
This involves collecting massive amounts of data over a set period, aggregating it, and then comparing different hospitals or clinics against the national average.
Examples include systems like MBR-ACE, which monitors perinatal mortality, or PICANET for pediatric intensive care.
These systems often publish what are called funnel plots. Imagine a graph where the x-axis is the number of patients treated and the axis is the mortality rate.
The funnel shape represents the acceptable statistical variance.
If a specific hospital's data point lands outside that funnel, it visually demonstrates that they have an excess mortality rate compared to the national baseline.
But the fatal flaw is right there in the terminology, retrospective.
Yes, it's historical data. It tells a hospital administrator that too many people died last year. It does absolutely nothing to stop someone who is currently walking the halls and killing patients today.
Precisely. Which is why the second category of monitoring is the critical one, real-time perspective monitoring.
This utilizes advanced tools like VLID plots, variable life-adjusted display.
These systems continually monitor the accumulated data day by day, patient by patient.
They don't just count bodies. They compare the observed number of deaths against the expected number of deaths, carefully adjusting for the specific risk profile and age of the patients involved.
So if a doctor is treating a highly vulnerable elderly population, the algorithm accounts for a naturally higher expected mortality rate.
But if the observed deaths spike suddenly above that carefully calibrated algorithmic threshold, an automated alarm is triggered.
It completely removes the human bias, the professional loyalty, and the institutional blindness from the equation. It is pure data.
And this leads us to the most devastating, haunting fact in this entire case file.
Yep.
Professor Spiegelhalter took the historical mortality data from Harold Shipman's practice, the raw numbers of who died and when, and he applied a risk-adjusted sequential probability ratio test, an SPRT algorithm, to the data retroactively.
He wanted to see if the mathematics would have caught what the human beings missed.
He ran a simulation to see if the computer would have recognized the killer.
And the results are staggering.
The algorithm showed that an undeniable, statistically significant alarm would have been triggered in the year 1985.
1985. That is 13 years before Dr. Linda Reynolds noticed the forms. 13 years before the forged will.
13 years of uninterrupted killing. At that point in 1985, Shipman had murdered only around 40 patients.
If this statistical monitoring had been actively running in the background of the NHS, the data alone would have demanded an immediate mandatory investigation.
The mathematics would have pointed directly at him. Over 200 lives could have been saved if the numbers had simply been watched by a cold, unfeeling algorithm.
It is a gut-wrenching realization to process.
It really is.
We've traced this journey from a young medical student in 1970s Yorkshire with a severe pethidine habit, through a disciplinary system that chose to blindly trust him, into a decades-long nightmare in the quiet living rooms of Hyde.
We are looking at a man who weaponized the deep respect granted to his profession to become the worst serial killer in British history, hiding in plain sight behind a comforting bedside manner and the stroke of a pen on a death certificate.
The Shipman case forces us to confront a deeply uncomfortable reality about modern healthcare.
We desperately want to believe that the white coat guarantees benevolence. We want to believe that our human intuition will warn us of evil in our midst.
But the historical data proves that trust, when entirely decoupled from verification, is deadly.
The human element failed at every single level. From the GMC ignoring the police in 1975, to D.I. Smith dropping the case in March 1998, to the coroner's office accepting the paperwork without question.
Only the cold, unfeeling metadata on a hard drive and the retroactive algorithms of a statistician were capable of telling the undeniable truth.
We want medicine to be precise, clear, and perfectly safe. But the human beings practicing it are complex, flawed, and sometimes capable of unimaginable darkness.
The question for you to mull over long after this discussion ends is this. As medicine becomes increasingly complex, how do we balance the deep personal trust we must place in our local doctors with the cold, unfeeling algorithms required to monitor them and keep us safe?
It's a heavy thought.
Thank you for joining this deep dive into the case files of Case Unmasked. Remember, the truth is often hidden in the details we overlook.